Two corrupt detectives thought they had just scored the ultimate payday. $250,000 seized from a quiet, hard-working auto shop owner. They figured he was an easy mark. Just another civilian too intimidated to fight the badge. They were dead wrong. They had just robbed a retired Delta Force commander. The heavy steel roll-up doors of Voss Premier Restorations were half closed, shielding the high-end auto shop from the muggy, unforgiving heat of a late Atlanta afternoon. Inside, 52-year-old Harlan Voss was methodically hand-buffing the fender of a pristine 1969 Shelby GT 500. Harlan was a man of few words and strict routines. He moved with a deliberate, quiet efficiency that commanded respect from his small crew of mechanics. Standing at 6'2", with a lean, weathered build and eyes that missed absolutely nothing, he had spent the last 8 years building his business from the ground up. To the local community in Fulton County, Harlan was a pillar. A black business owner who hired local kids, sponsored Little League teams, and stayed entirely out of neighborhood politics. But to Detective Donovan Crow and Detective Reed Calder, Harlan Voss was just a target. Crow and Calder were assigned to a specialized narcotics and gang interdiction task force. Over the years, the unit had morphed from a shield for the community into a highly organized, state-sanctioned extortion ring. Their weapon of choice was not their service pistols. It was a controversial legal loophole known as civil asset forfeiture. It allowed law enforcement to seize cash and property if they merely suspected it was tied to a crime, without ever having to file formal charges against the owner. For Crow, a heavy-set man with a permanent scowl and a gambling problem, it was a license to steal. For Calder, a sharp-eyed, cynical veteran who preferred to operate in the shadows, it was a tax on the weak. They had been watching Harlan for 3 weeks. Informants had whispered that Voss was making a massive cash transaction to purchase the commercial warehouse directly adjacent to his shop. The closing was set for the following week, and Harlan had withdrawn exactly $250,000 in legitimate, heavily documented business funds, locking it in a heavy floor safe in his back office. The shop was empty except for Harlan. The harsh screech of tires breaking on the asphalt outside was the only warning he got. The side door was violently kicked open, the splintered wood echoing through the cavernous garage. Crow and Calder stormed in, tactical vests over their plain clothes, badges bouncing on heavy chains around their necks. Their weapons were drawn but pointed downward, a calculated move meant to terrify without crossing the line into an immediate shooting scenario. "Fulton County Task Force, nobody moves," Crow barked, his voice dripping with artificial adrenaline. Harlan did not flinch. He did not drop the microfiber cloth in his hand. He simply turned, his face an unreadable mask of absolute calm, and watched the two men advance. "Hands where I can see them, Voss," Calder ordered, flanking Harlan to the right and cutting off his path to the toolboxes. Harlan slowly raised his hands to chest level, palms open. "Officers," he said, his voice completely devoid of the panic they were so used to hearing. "How can I help you?" "We have a warrant to search these premises," Crow sneered, waving a folded piece of paper in his left hand without ever offering Harlan the chance to read it. "We received an anonymous tip that this facility is being used to launder narcotics proceeds for the East Side Syndicate." "That's quite a story," Harlan replied softly. His eyes did not dart around the room. Instead, he was cataloging. He noted the tape over their body cameras. He noted Calder's finger resting lazily inside the trigger guard. Poor discipline. He noted the slight tremor in Crow's left hand, betraying the thrill of the hunt. "Cut the crap!" Crow snapped, stepping into Harlan's personal space and trying to use his bulk to intimidate. "We know about the safe in the back office. We know about the cash. Open it. Or we bring in a breaching team and tear this classic car to pieces, looking for contraband." A normal civilian would have folded. A normal civilian would have started shouting about their rights, demanding a lawyer, letting their heart rate spike to 160 beats per minute. Harlan's heart rate hovered at a steady, icy 60. He recognized a tactical ambush when he saw one, and he knew that surviving an ambush meant controlling the environment and yielding the initiative until the enemy made a mistake. "I'll open the safe," Harlan said, his tone accommodating. "No need to damage the vehicles." He led them to the small cinder block office in the back. The air smelled of old paper and motor oil. Harlan knelt and spun the dial on the heavy steel floor safe. The lock clicked heavily, and he pulled the heavy door open, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills bound in bank straps. Crow's eyes went wide, a hungry gleam flashing across his face. He shoved Harlan roughly out of the way. "Step back," he ordered, eagerly pulling a heavy canvas duffel bag from his shoulder. "That money is the capital for a real estate acquisition," Harlan stated calmly, watching Crow dump the stacks into the bag. "I have the withdrawal receipts from Sun Trust Bank, the escrow paperwork, and the signed letter of intent right there on the desk." "Drug money can be deposited in banks too, Voss," Calder said with a smirk, standing near the door with his weapon holstered but his hand resting on the grip. "This cash is being seized under suspicion of illicit enterprise. If it's clean, you can petition the county to get it back. See you in court in about 3 years. Crow zipped the bag, hefting the heavy canvas over his shoulder. He grabbed a blank seizure receipt from his pocket, scribbled an illegible signature, and tossed it onto Harlan's desk. "Have a good weekend, Harlan. Don't leave town." They backed out of the office, keeping their eyes on him until they reached the garage bay, then turned and hustled out to their unmarked Dodge Charger. The tires squealed as they sped off into the twilight. Harlan stood in the doorway of his office, watching the dust settle in the driveway. He did not rush to the phone to call 911. He did not call a lawyer. He walked over to his desk, picked up the useless seizure receipt, and looked at the illegible scroll. Then he reached under the lip of his oak desk and pulled a tiny hidden SD card from a secondary covert camera system he had installed himself, a system completely isolated from the shop's main Wi-Fi, one the cops had not known to disable. Harlan plugged the SD card into his laptop. He had their faces, their voices, and the license plate of their unmarked car. "Crow and Calder," Harlan whispered to himself, his voice dropping an octave into a cold, clinical register. For 8 years, Harlan Voss had tried to leave the war behind, but the war had just walked through his front door. 80 miles away in the VIP booth of a high-end, dimly lit cigar lounge in Buckhead, Crow and Calder were celebrating. The duffel bag of cash was safely locked in the trunk of Crow's car. They had already skimmed $50,000 off the top for operational expenses before logging the remaining $200,000 into the precinct's evidence locker. A standard play. The 50 grand was their untouchable bonus, effectively untraceable. "I told you," Crow laughed, swirling a glass of expensive bourbon. "Easiest score of the year." The guy was practically shaking. "Didn't even ask for a lawyer." Calder took a slow drag from his cigar, though his expression was not quite as celebratory. He was staring at the amber liquid in his glass, replaying the raid in his mind. Something was gnawing at the back of his brain. "He wasn't shaking, Donovan," Calder muttered, leaning forward. "What? Voss, he wasn't shaking. Did you look at his eyes?" Calder tapped the side of his own head. "When we breached the door, he didn't jump. When you got in his face, he didn't lean back. He just looked at us, like he was sizing us up, like he was taking inventory." Crow waved a hand dismissively. "He was in shock, Reed. People freeze. You're overthinking it. He's a mechanic. What's he gonna do? Hit us with a wrench? We have the badge. We own this town." "Maybe," Calder said, pulling out his phone. "But I don't like loose ends. I'm going to run a deep background on him, beyond the state level. Let's make sure this guy doesn't have an uncle who's a federal judge or some crap." Calder logged into the National Crime Information Center database through his secure mobile terminal. He typed in Harlan Voss's name, date of birth, and social security number, expecting to see the usual array of minor traffic tickets or a completely blank slate. The screen loaded for several long seconds. Then the background of the application turned completely red. A heavy bold text box appeared in the center of the screen. "Restricted file. Department of Defense clearance. Tier 1 required. This inquiry has been logged. Cease immediately." Calder felt the blood drain from his face. The cigar almost slipped from his fingers. "Donovan," he whispered. Crow looked up, annoyed. "What?" Calder turned the phone around. "State PD doesn't get DOD blocks. The FBI gets DOD blocks." What the hell did we just rob? While Calder was staring at the red screen of death on his phone, Harlan Voss was sitting in total darkness in his living room. The glow of a heavily encrypted, ruggedized laptop illuminated his face. Harlan was not just a mechanic. 20 years ago, he was a Tier 1 operator for the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, commonly known as Delta Force or Combat Applications Group. But Harlan was not just a door kicker. For the last 6 years of his military career, he was a commander within JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, specializing in irregular warfare, intelligence gathering, and psychological operations. He had dismantled terror cells from the inside out in places that did not exist on standard maps. He knew how to destroy a man's life without ever touching him. Harlan did not dial the local police internal affairs department. He dialed a satellite relay number that routed through 3 different countries before ringing in a secure bunker in Fort Liberty, North Carolina. The line clicked. "Talk to me," a gruff voice answered. It was Cole, Harlan's former intelligence chief, who now worked as a senior civilian contractor for the Department of Defense. "Cole, it's Harlan." "Well, damn, I thought you were dead or worse, playing golf." Cole chuckled. "What do you need, boss?" "I need a footprint on 2 Fulton County detectives, Donovan Crow and Reed Calder. I need their financials, their burner phones, their GPS history for the last 6 months, and the private addresses of their offshore or hidden safety deposit boxes. They hit my shop tonight, under color of law." The line went dead silent. The amusement instantly vanished from Cole's voice. "They hit you? They stole from you?" $250,000 cash. Cole let out a long, slow whistle. "These boys just strapped themselves to a bomb and don't even know the fuse is lit. Give me 2 hours. I'll give you the keys to their entire existence." The psychological warfare began. Crow was sound asleep in his sprawling, gated suburban home, a house he easily paid for with his cut of illicit seizures. He awoke suddenly to a strange sound. It was not a crash. It was a digital beep. He sat up in bed, instantly alert, reaching for the Glock 19 on his nightstand. He listened intently. It was his home security system, but the alarm was not blaring. The keypad in the hallway was emitting the soft, rhythmic chime, indicating the system had been voluntarily disarmed. Crow crept out of his bedroom, sweeping the hallway with his weapon. The house was pitch black. He moved down the stairs, adrenaline pounding in his ears. He checked the front door. Locked. He checked the back patio. Locked. He walked into the kitchen and flipped on the overhead light. There, sitting perfectly in the dead center of his pristine granite kitchen island, was a single unfired 5.56mm rifle cartridge. Beneath the brass casing was a folded piece of paper. Crow's hands trembled as he kept his gun raised, scanning the empty kitchen. Seeing no one, he slowly reached out and unfolded the paper. Written in perfect block-lettered handwriting were 4 words: "I want it back." Simultaneously across town in a high-rise downtown condo, Reed Calder was wide awake, sweating through his shirt. He had not been able to sleep since seeing the DoD warning screen. He was sitting at his computer, frantically trying to move his hidden illicit funds from an offshore Cayman account into a decentralized cryptocurrency wallet. He needed to hide his assets and figure out an exit strategy. He clicked refresh on his Cayman banking portal. The balance, which had read $412,000 just minutes prior, suddenly flickered. The numbers rolled downward like a slot machine until the screen read 0. Calder gasped, slamming his hand against the desk. "No, no, no!" He frantically clicked through the transaction history. There was only one outgoing wire transfer executed just seconds ago, routing the money through a dozen shell companies before vanishing entirely. The memo line on the wire transfer read, "Restitution, 1 of 2. Calder's phone vibrated on the desk, nearly making him jump out of his skin. The caller ID was restricted. He answered it, his breathing shallow. "Hello." There was no voice on the other end, just the distinct rhythmic clicking of a dial on a heavy floor safe being spun. Then a soft, familiar voice spoke. "You guys really should have checked my references, Reed." The line went dead. The hunters were now the hunted, and the ghost of JSOC had just locked onto his targets. The Georgia rain was coming down in sheets, hammering against the windshield of Donovan Crow's unmarked Dodge Charger. He was parked under the flickering amber glow of a broken street lamp behind an abandoned strip mall in Decatur. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. The passenger door wrenched open, and Reed Calder slid into the front seat, soaking wet and looking like a ghost. He did not bother saying hello. "My Cayman accounts are zeroed," Calder said, his voice trembling, lacking all the cynical confidence he had displayed just hours earlier at the cigar lounge. $412,000 evaporated, routed through 12 different decentralized exchanges in 3 seconds. He took it all, Donovan. Crow pulled the 5.56mm bullet from his jacket pocket and slammed it onto the dashboard. He broke into my house, Reed. He bypassed a monitored ADT security system, walked past my bedroom, left this on the kitchen counter, and locked the door on his way out. We didn't just rob the wrong guy. We robbed a phantom. I ran his name, Donovan. The Department of Defense blocked the query. Tier 1 clearance. You know what that means? Calder wiped the rain from his face, his eyes darting frantically around the dark parking lot. He's Delta or DevGru or CIA Special Activities. It doesn't matter. He's a professional killer with the backing of the federal government. And we just stole $250,000 from him. Crow gritted his teeth, his survival instinct warring with his greed. He's one man. We have a whole task force. We have badges. We go to his shop right now, kick the door, plant a kilo of fentanyl in his desk, and arrest him. If he resists, we put him down. He's a civilian now. He bleeds like anyone else. Calder looked at Crow as if he were completely insane. You think a guy who can wipe an offshore account and goes through your house without waking you up is going to let you just walk up to his shop with a bag of fake drugs? He's watching us right now, Donovan. I guarantee it. Calder was right. 2 miles away, sitting in the back of an unmarked, heavily armored black SUV, Harlan Voss was staring at a bank of 4 illuminated monitors. He was wearing a tactical headset, sipping black coffee. On the top left screen, a red GPS dot blinked steadily over the Decatur strip mall. Harlan had attached a magnetic GPS tracker to the undercarriage of Crow's Charger while Crow was inside stealing his money. Through the headset, Harlan could hear every word the 2 detectives were saying. Cole, Harlan's DoD contact, had bypassed their cell phone microphones, turning their own devices into hot mics. "We need to move the stash," Calder's voice crackled through Harlan's earpiece. "If he can find my offshore accounts, he can find the physical cash. We have over $3 million in cash and seized assets sitting in that climate-controlled storage unit off Route 85. If he gets to that, we're dead. The cartel guys we stole half that money from will kill us if we can't pay them their kickbacks." "All right," Crow replied, his voice heavy with panic. "We call Sergeant Briggs. We get him to meet us at the storage facility. We load the cash into the vans, move it to the secondary safe house, and figure out how to handle Voss tomorrow." In the SUV, Harlan allowed himself a grim, fleeting smile. The trap was set. They were doing exactly what he wanted. When you apply overwhelming, inexplicable pressure to corrupt men, they don't fight back. They run to protect their largest pile of treasure. "Cole," Harlan said quietly into his mic. "They're moving to the primary cache, Route 85 storage facility." "Copy that, Commander," Cole's voice replied from Fort Liberty. "I've got eyes in the sky, repositioning a keyhole satellite to provide overhead thermal. Are you green lighting the secondary phase?" "Green light," Harlan confirmed. "Call the suits." Harlan put the SUV in drive. It was time to show them what a real raid looked like. Apex Secure Storage was a massive fortress-like facility on the industrial outskirts of Atlanta. It was favored by wealthy clients for its anonymity and heavy security. Crow, Calder, and their corrupt superior, Sergeant Briggs, arrived in 2 separate vehicles. The rain had slowed to a miserable drizzle. They used a cloned keycard to bypass the main gate and drove their vehicles directly up to Unit 402, a double-wide garage with reinforced steel doors. "Hurry up! Get the vans backed up to the door," Briggs barked. He was a balding, stocky man who was sweating profusely, furious that his early morning had been interrupted by a crisis. "If this guy is who you say he is, we grab the duffels and scatter." Calder punched the digital code into the keypad. The heavy steel door rolled upward with a loud mechanical grinding noise. Crow drew his service weapon, sweeping the interior out of pure paranoia. The unit was supposed to be packed to the ceiling with shrink-wrapped pallets of cash, seized Rolex watches, and stolen narcotics. Instead, it was completely empty. There was no money. There were no pallets. There was only a single folding metal chair sitting dead center on the concrete floor. On the chair was a ruggedized military laptop. Crow lowered his gun, his jaw dropping. "Where is it? Where's the money?" Calder felt his knees go weak. He stumbled backward, barely catching himself on the bumper of the van. He beat us here. He took it. He took everything. Suddenly, the screen of the laptop flared to life, casting a harsh blue light across the empty concrete walls. The internal speakers crackled, and a calm, deep voice echoed through the garage. "Good morning, detectives." Briggs drew his weapon, aiming it at the laptop as if he could shoot the voice. "Voss, you're a dead man, you hear me? You're dead." "I don't think so, Sergeant," Harlan's voice replied evenly. "You see, when you stole my $250,000, you made a critical tactical error. You assumed I was a civilian." "We know who you are, you Delta freak," Crow screamed, pacing the room. "We're cops. We'll put out a statewide APB on you. We'll bury you." "You didn't let me finish," Harlan said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. "You assumed the money was mine." The laptop screen shifted from a black interface to a live video feed. It showed Crow, Calder, and Briggs standing in the storage unit, shot from a camera mounted perfectly above the door. "The $250,000 you stole was serialized bait money provided by the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Public Corruption Task Force," Harlan explained. "The FBI has been trying to build a RICO case against your unit for 2 years, but you were too careful. You only targeted people who couldn't fight back. You only stole from people without a voice. So the Bureau asked me for a favor. They needed a target you couldn't resist." Calder's breath hitched. He looked at Crow, who had turned a sickly shade of gray. The twist hit them like a freight train. Harlan Voss was not a vigilante acting on his own. He was an authorized, federally sanctioned operative running a deep cover sting. "Those pallets of cash you're looking for," Harlan continued, "they were loaded onto federal transport trucks earlier. The FBI has your ledgers. They have your cartel kickback receipts. And Reed, they have the $400,000 I wired out of your Cayman account. It's sitting in a Department of Justice escrow account." "No, no, no," Briggs muttered, dropping his gun to the concrete floor. It clattered loudly, echoing in the cavernous space. He put his hands on his head. "We're going to federal prison." "Worse," Harlan corrected him. "You're going to federal prison as dirty cops who stole cartel money. I hear the cartel has a very long reach inside the federal penitentiary system." "Screw this," Crow roared. He leveled his gun at the laptop and fired 3 times. The screen shattered, sparking and going dark. The echo of the gunshots was deafening. "Donovan, you idiot!" Calder screamed. Before Crow could turn around, the storage facility's massive exterior floodlights snapped on, blinding them. The shrieking wail of sirens filled the air from every direction. Dozens of black SUVs with flashing red and blue lights swarmed the alleyway, blocking off both ends of the facility. Doors slammed open. Over 30 heavily armed FBI SWAT agents poured out, their rifles trained on the 3 corrupt cops. Red laser sights danced across Crow's chest. "FBI, drop your weapons. Get on the ground now," the lead agent roared over a bullhorn. Crow hesitated, the smoking gun still in his hand. For a split second, he calculated his odds. He looked at the laser dots on his chest. Then, slowly, the fight drained out of him. He dropped the gun and fell to his knees, lacing his fingers behind his head. Calder and Briggs were already flat on the wet concrete, sobbing. Harlan Voss watched the entire takedown from the rooftop of an adjacent building, looking through a thermal scope. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He just watched until the 3 men were handcuffed, stripped of their badges, and thrown into the back of armored transport vehicles. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Cole. "Clean sweep, Harlan. The FBI director is thrilled. You got your $250,000 back in your safe, perfectly untouched." "Thanks, Cole. Tell the Bureau they owe me a new laptop," Harlan said softly. "Will do. So, what's next for the great Commander Voss? Going back into the field?" Harlan lowered his rifle and looked out over the waking city of Atlanta. The sun was just beginning to peek over the skyline, casting a warm, golden glow over the wet streets. "No," Harlan replied, turning toward the stairwell. "I've got a '69 Shelby GT 500 that needs its fender buffed. I've got work to do." Harlan Voss went back to being a ghost, a quiet man running a quiet shop. But the criminal underworld and the corrupt halls of power in Fulton County learned a permanent lesson. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak one, especially when that quiet man is a Delta Force commander. What a satisfying ending. Harlan proved that absolute discipline and tactical patience will always outsmart brute force corruption. The corrupt cops thought they were above the law, but they just dug their own graves by targeting a true American hero. Did you see that federal sting twist coming? Let us know what you would have done if you were in Harlan's shoes in the comments below. If you love this story of ultimate justice, make sure to like, share this video, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling true-to-life stories. See you in the next one.